So, thank you very much for offering me the opportunity to discuss the dilemma of novel excipients. My name is Martin Klatt. I'm working at BASF Pharma Solutions, and I'm representing today two industry associations, IPAC Europe and the European Fine Chemicals Group, EFCG. So on the next slide, you will see my agenda. After a brief intro, who we are, I would like to guide you really from a very high-level perspective what excipients are and specifically what novel excipients are. We truly believe in the importance of excipients in the innovation. Unfortunately, there's a dilemma in the use of excipients due to some regulatory hurdles in Europe. I will explain a bit what the FDA is offering to support the industry and, let's say, reflecting where we see need for action here in Europe. We'll close the meeting with a few take-home messages before I will hand back to the next speaker. Okay, a brief intro. IPAC Europe is representing the manufacturers, the distributors, but also the users of excipients, and their core is to contribute to the development of quality excipients. One important aspect they are covering is the promotion of harmonized guidelines. So think about GMP guidelines for excipients. That is all, let's say, to increase and improve the standards of patient safety, but also to think about patients' needs. The European Fine Chemicals Group is the voice of European fine chemical manufacturers. And we are having, and we advocate here in Europe for industrial policies which help us playing in the field, but also to improve our competitiveness and without jeopardizing our high quality standards. If you're more interested, you will see also our links in the bottom of the slide. Now, when you ask me what is an excipient, and you would look into the EU directives, you would see a very broad description. It's any constituent of a medicinal product other than the active substance or the packaging material. That sounds pretty broad. Now let's have a look at a scheme here where you see the API, the active pharmaceutical ingredient, in yellow. That is volume-wise, in general, the smallest part of a formulation. But to make it administrable, to bring it into a body, you need excipients from binders, fillers, up to the coating to make it happen. So they are really essential to make a drug bioavailable at the end of the day. So what can they do? And I think there are multiple things excipients can do. As I already said, a very simple thing is, let's say, to act as a filler or a diluent to of an API. Think about, let's say, the poor solubility of the most modern APIs, and you need solubility enhancers. But you need also products which are securing them in terms of, let's say, their sensitivity. I like to look also into the needs of a patient and also the safety of a patient. So you could look into the control rate of drug releases. So instead of having peaks of a delivery or release, you could have that in a much more controlled way. But it could also be a much easier use of medicine, and instead of getting a parenteral use, to bring it into a soft gel, for instance. But think also about, let's say, taste masking. Last but not least, it's all about, let's say, also creating compliance and improving the compliance of the use. So think about, let's say, how often a patient needs to use a drug. Sometimes it's 4 times a day, and if you can reduce that to once a day or even once in a week, that would be a tremendous advantage, which you can steer with excipients. Now, what is a novel excipient? Quite simplistically spoken, it's an excipient which is used for the first time in a drug product. So that could be really a new chemical entity or a modified polymer, up to also a mix of 2 or 3 excipients, so-called co-processed excipients. But it could also be something which has been not used in the same administrative route. So what has been used eventually in a parental mode and is going then into a different route is considered novel. Now, why do we believe in the importance of excipients in innovation? Because there are so many issues which we are confronted in the development of modern medicines. Think about the very poor solubility and permeability of APIs, so-called BPC class 2, 3, and 4 APIs. They are as soluble like a brick or like a chewing gum, and you would like to make them bioavailable. You could also think about, let's say, modern formulation technologies like continuous manufacturing procedures, like hot melt extrusion, and you would need appropriate excipients to do that. What is certainly happening more and more is that the modern APIs are pretty sensitive to oxygen, to humidity, and you need to protect them. So that is something really key in the development. When I was a kid, medicine had to taste bitter. Fortunately, that changed, and you can taste mask medicines, which is very important in times of today. What we all have seen is a tremendous development. That is, for me, still one of the biggest miracles of the last 12 months, is the use of lipid nanoparticles in mRNA vaccines. And I think we all would agree that is a tremendous innovation which is helping all of us and bring tremendous value. Now, when you have seen the previous slide, everyone would say, Martin, go ahead, so use novel excipients. So that is great, sounds good. Now, I would respond, there is a dilemma in the use, specifically in excipients. Because excipients are not treated in the same way like APIs. There's no regulatory pathway for an independent approval. So those who are using a novel excipient in the development of a new medicine have no clue what will happen at the authority. That is not good. In addition, let's say for each new market authorization application, you have to submit so much data, which are even open and is not protecting the developer of a novel excipient. What makes it even worse is, for those who are willing to go for novel excipients, they are adding further delays in the time to market, and that is certainly not what we need in modern times, from a commercial perspective, nor from, let's say, a need perspective. All this together, so handling excipients very differently from APIs, with having also even no IP protection, is certainly not supporting the innovation of medicines here in Europe. Now, if you look a bit across what are other authorities doing, of course, we like to look into North America and see what the FDA is offering. Now, the FDA has always allowed a filing for proprietary information in what they call Type 4 master files. So here you can bring in information and also protect them. What I really liked was a survey which was conducted in 2019 by covering a lot of stakeholders and offering an opportunity to give the FDA feedback. Based on the results, the FDA launched very recently in September of this year a voluntary excipient pilot program, which is really helping, at least for a first step and at limited numbers of novel excipients, a review before using them for the first time. So that is giving a lot of assurance before a user in the pharmaceutical industry wants to use them. The program is today limited to previously or for novel excipients which have not been used previously in FDA-approved drugs, nor for those who are going into food. But I see that as a real important first step. And the FDA, the FDA will collect a short list of products, but it's also going along with an obligation to the manufacturers, because once selected, they have to provide quite an enormous set of data on tox and quality. However, we are seeing that as a great move to foster development and really to stimulate innovation. So where do we see a need for action? I think the pandemic has shown that less conservative approaches can be made happen. And think about the nanoparticles in the mRNA vaccines. Here, the approval process was much faster and much more pragmatic. And instead of doing this only during a crisis, we would like to see that also in the normal day to day, because we truly believe that there's so much room for, let's say, innovation, and that should be in benefit to patients at the end of the day. I think we need a workable system for the assessment of novel excipients, but also for co-process excipients, so mixes of 2 or 3 excipients, which can help formulation processes. That is not existing in Europe, and I think here we need a kind of a master file system to help us. Last but not least, a bit like as in the API field, where you have in the filing an open and a closed part, we would like to see that also in the excipients field to protect the IP for the manufacturers. So to make the story short and to comprise it, I hope I could deliver them 3 important messages. Excipients play a very important role to overcome formulation issues, and they will play an important part to create innovative medicines. Think about mRNA, but not only mRNA vaccines, it's about small molecules and large molecules altogether. However, in Europe, there's no regulatory pathway for novel excipients, which we consider as a big problem. We need to encourage, and that's my second message, the use of novel excipients, because no one wants to be the first, to be honest. You take so much risk, and as I explained, it takes you so much efforts to create the data together with the API, and you know what the authorities will say. So here, everyone wants to be the first second rather than to be the first, and that is certainly not a precondition to for innovation. Last but not least, we need to fill the vacuum, the regulatory vacuum, if you want, in Europe, and we need to catch up, specifically if we compare ourselves with other regions which are further developed. We need to remove barriers and, let's say, move a step into the right direction, which could be something similar what FDA is doing currently on the excipient program, pilot program, or with their master file schemes. On the last slide, that's probably what I would like to hand over is there are multiple stakeholders, from the manufacturers of excipients to those who are using it, to the patients, to the authorities. We all have different views on it, but we all have one objective, and that is to bring safe and great innovative medicines to the market. And with this, I'm closing my little intro here. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me here today. Today's topic is co-processed multifunctional excipients in tableting. My name is Vinit Nigudkar, and I am a global tech service and application development staff scientist at Innophos. I'm responsible for managing the technical service activities, application development work, and innovation of new products for the pharma and health segment at Innophos. Today's presentation will cover the definition of co-processed multifunctional excipients or CPMEs according to IPEC and the advantages that they offer for both manufacturers and consumers. We will then proceed to talk about the current clean label trend, which influences formulation and manufacturing decisions. It will be very informative to know the value that these CPMEs offer, and we have studies with our co-process excipients against conventional excipients to demonstrate the advantages. And lastly, I will leave you with an overview of Innophos's newest co-processed multifunctional excipients, which are available today. So, what are CPMEs? Co-processed multifunctional excipients, according to IPEC, are defined as a combination of two or more compendial or non-compendial excipients which are designed to physically modify their properties in an advantageous manner, which is not achievable by simple mixing or physical blending. These are obtained without significant chemical change, so no covalent bond form, weak hydrogen bonding, or ionic association during processing is, however, permissible. These ingredients are obtained by several different processes, such as spray drying, wet granulation, hot melt extrusion, and other different processes. Let's look at the advantages of CPMEs. Now, co-processed multifunctional excipients offer several different advantages for both manufacturers and consumers. They reduce production time and improve efficiency by as much as 40%. Now, this increase in efficiency leads to accelerated speed to market. Plus, CPMEs display better physicochemical properties, indicating superior tablet integrity with improved performance and robustness. Now, because these CPMEs have the capability to simplify formulations and reduce the number of ingredients in a formula, these impart flexibility to manufacturers to not only employ more number of actives but also in a greater quantity. For consumers, these CPMEs offer smaller tablets, label friendly claims, and a reduced dose frequency. In the coming slides, I will share these studies that confirm these benefits. Clean label is a consumer driven trend towards fewer ingredients. A co-processed multifunctional excipients takes place of several other ingredients, which then simplifies the label. This is becoming an attractive solution for dietary supplement manufacturers. The clean label movement continues to grow and broaden. In 2020, according to Innova Market Insights, 66% of all supplement introductions in North America had at least one clean label claim. And to demonstrate the value of CPMEs and meeting this challenge, I would like to bring your attention to the value proposition of CPMEs. The three key areas of our value proposition are increased manufacturing efficiency, improved tableting performance, and consumer friendliness. In the area of efficiency, co-processed excipients improve manufacturing efficiency by simplifying formulation and reducing the number of ingredients employed to make a tablet. CPMEs, which are multifunctional in nature, replace the functionality of a filler, a binder, a flow agent, as well as being an excellent source of calcium and phosphorus. This is important because in a manufacturing facility, this results in fewer quality control checks, which means there are less ingredients to weigh, load, and to keep a lower inventory. This results in faster batch times, which leads to accelerated speed to market, which is a critical benefit to stay ahead of the competition. When it comes to performance, reduced ingredients in the formula offer flexibility in the number and amount of actives employed. By achieving a high compressibility, even at a lower compression force, there is no need to put pressure on the machine to get a particular hardness. Thus, this reduces the wear and tear on the machine and increases the longevity of the equipment in the long run. Additionally, CPMEs have the potential to lower cost and use since they are multifunctional in nature. And lastly, coming to the consumer friendly approach and benefit of CPMEs, consumers find a great value in smaller tablets, especially for geriatrics and pediatrics. By using a co-processed excipient, the tablet size has the potential to be reduced up to 30% or more. Additionally, today's consumers prefer less chemically sounding names on the label, and less ingredients in the formula means fewer ingredients on the label. And the overall dosing frequency, because of all these benefits, is reduced. This is exactly what the consumers prefer. We come to the study of our co-processed excipients against conventional excipients. Now, this particular study is a comparison between our newest co-processed excipient, which is ATAB-MD. ATAB-MD is dicalcium phosphate anhydrous co-processed with maltodextrin. For this study, we have used a Green's herbal blend as the active ingredient. And you will see the list of ingredients employed in this active blend at the bottom of the slide. When you look at the formula to the left, these are tablets made with conventional excipients. And we have used microcrystalline cellulose and dicalcium phosphate as the filler, calcium carbonate as the calcium source, maltodextrin as the binder, silicon dioxide as the glidant, cross carbamylose sodium as the disintegrant, and magnesium stearate as the lubricant. Coming to the formula to the right, ATAB MD has successfully replaced the functionality of DCP, MCC, calcium carbonate, maltodextrin, and silicon dioxide, and thus reducing the overall number of ingredients from 8 ingredients to 4 ingredients. What do the results look like? We have conducted in-house lab studies which are located in the chart below, and we see several significant areas of note which I have highlighted at the top. We see a 50% reduction in the number of ingredients, along with a 50% increase in average hardness, 25% increase in average thickness, and an overall reduction of 34% in tablet weight. When we compare the processing times for this study, we see that there has been a 50% reduction in processing time, where ATAB-MD is the faster one. The second study is Nutratab, which is co-processed tricalcium phosphate along with guar gum against conventional excipients. Similar to the first study, we have tablets made using conventional excipients, and in this case, we have used a multivitamin blend as the active ingredient. You will see the list of vitamins employed in that formula also at the bottom of the slide. Coming to the right, Nutratab again has replaced all the traditional excipients apart from cross carbamylose sodium and magnesium stearate in this formula. The input amount for both these formulas in ATAB-MD and Nutratab for the active blend is exactly the same. The only difference in percentages you see over here is because it is relative to the tablet weight. Results for this study show that there has been a 50% in the number of ingredients, even in this case, with a 5% increase in average hardness, 6% decrease in average thickness, and overall 12% reduction in tablet weight. The difference in processing time in this case revealed a 44% reduction, with Nutratab being the faster one. Thus, we can conclude that both ATAB-MD and Nutratab in these studies have significantly reduced tablet size, have reduced the processing time, and have enhanced compressibility. At Innophos, we have several co-processed excipients. which I'm going to go through today. Nutratab, which is co-processed tricalcium phosphate and guar gum, has 35% calcium and 17% phosphorus. This CPME is used in nutraceutical applications. Tritab PVP is our second CPME, which is co-processed tricalcium phosphate along with polyvinyl pyrrolidone. This as well has 35% calcium and 17% phosphorus, and this is used in pharmaceutical applications. Now, lastly, we come to our newest and latest co-processed multifunctional excipient, ATAB-MD, which is dicalcium phosphate anhydrous co-processed with maltodextrin, which has 23% of calcium and 18% of phosphorus. This CPME is used in both pharmaceutical as well as nutraceutical applications. What I've hoped you've heard today is that CPMEs are a solution for creating smaller tablets with label friendly claims. And not only that, these CPMEs are an excellent source for calcium and phosphorus. They enhance compressibility, they simplify formulation, they reduce processing time, and all in all, they increase manufacturing efficiency, which leads to faster speed to market. Thank you so much for joining me here today. My email and contact info is provided over here, so please feel free to ask any questions or if you'd just like to discuss further. I highly encourage you to visit our website and download and read our white paper, which shares great information about how CPMEs are an ideal solution for both manufacturers and consumers. Thank you.
Well, hello everybody. My name's Ian Moore and I'm Head of Global Quality Assurance for Croda, a supplier of excipients. In this second session, I'd like to talk about novel excipients, quality GMPs and some recent experience that we've had with them. Next slide, please. In Croda, our purpose is smart science to improve lives. The science part is fairly straightforward. After all, we're manufacturing substances using chemistry and physics. However, whose lives is it that we are improving? Well, our focus and passion is the consumer, or in this case, the patient, to make sure that our excipients are safe to use and of a high quality throughout. Next slide, please. With over 5,000 employees in 85 operating sites around the world, we have the ability to deliver excipients anywhere in the globe. Next slide, please. In this short session, I'd like to have a look at what is global best practice for defining GMP for standard excipients, and then how we can apply that to novel excipients. And finally, I'll share a few experiences with the excipients used in COVID-19 mRNA vaccines. Next slide, please. Excipient GMP expectations have been defined in the EU with the 2015 publication of the formalised risk assessment for the ascertained GMP for excipients. This is a really important piece of guidance from the EU, and it sets a global imperative. The reason for this is that the combination of excipient drug product is highly variable and context driven. The drug product application is key here, and one size of GMP will not fit all excipients. The guideline contains a basic set of GMP principles to be applied in excipient manufacturing, and this has been included in the guide and is, as I mentioned, highly flexible to allow for all the different spectrums of excipients that are available. With few exceptions elsewhere in the world, there are a couple of definitions of GMP for excipients. Brazil and China have defined this, but almost everywhere else has not got a prescriptive definition of GMP for excipients. Next slide, please. The guidelines were adopted in 2018 by the PICS, the Pharmaceutical Inspection Convention, They took that pretty much unaltered and had defined it as global best practice. And for those of you who don't know, the PICS is the trade association, if you like, for all the healthcare inspectors around the world. So the FDA, MHRA, and many others are members of this association, and they define best practice for all inspectors to follow when inspecting pharmaceutical manufacturers. So if you comply with these guidelines in the qualification and application of GMP to the excipients, then you will be following best practice, and you should at least make the inspector happy. Next slide, please. IPEC, the IPEC Federation, in this case, the International Pharmaceutical Excipients Council, and the US Parenteral Drug Association have collaborated together to provide a joint technical report number 54-6, which was published in late 2019. And this is how to apply these formalized risk assessments for drug manufacturing. It contains case studies and a lot of guidance on how to implement this in a pharmaceutical drug manufacturing environment. It's very well worth a read and a study, particularly for the case studies, if you haven't already implemented such systems. The risk assessment itself is shown on the next slide, please. And here it comes rather complicated, but I won't spend too much time going through everything. But I will indicate that there are 3 key components. In the top left section is the risk assessment done on the excipient in its use in the drug product in question. So the excipient brings threats and risks to the patient safety, and then in combination with the formulation, and you have to determine a risk rating there. In this example, high, medium, and low have been the terms used to identify the residual risks. This is then combined with the bottom section on the left-hand side of the supplier risk rating, and here we evaluate the GMP standards applied and the supply chain security and issues that may be present there. You combine those 2 risk assessments together in a simple matrix, such as the one illustrated in red, amber, and green, and come with an overall risk rating for that combination of excipient and supplier. You then have to decide if that residual risk is tolerable or not, and if it's not, then you have to go back around the loop and identify additional controls, perhaps in the formulation or in the manufacturing of the drug product, or a different engagement with the supplier. And out of that should, of course, come as well the specification for the excipient, because that will be a key control for risk. Once the risk is minimized to a level that's tolerable, then you go forward and utilize that excipient in your drug product and provide that to the market. Of course, that's not the end of the story for the risk assessment. Following ICH-Q9 principles, then they undergo regular risk review following changes during the manufacturing of the excipient or the drug product, or adverse events and other learnings. Next slide, please. So how can we apply the PDA-IPEC approach to novel excipients? Well, if we take the basic process and look at the excipient risks section, as the excipient is novel, there may be little or no organizational experience and knowledge about that particular excipient. The design and control space may not be fully developed. So this automatically would suggest a high to medium ranking for that part of the risk. In the supplier risk assessment, it's quite possible the supplier too may be involved with a new excipient, and so the design and control space may not be fully defined for them either. The extremes of production variability may not be understood, and although the logistical aspects of supply are not likely to be different to any other excipient. Again, we have an overall suggestion there that this would be a medium to high ranking, and combining those together, then it's quite probable high ranking is going to come out of that risk assessment. So what controls do we need to apply? Next slide, please. Well, which GMP should we be looking at? The PDA-IPEC technical report suggests a hierarchy of GMPs, starting with the least level of assurance up to the most. And that rough hierarchy translates into standards like ISO 9001, food GMP or GMP for cosmetic ingredients, IPEC PQG GMP or Excipient GMP for pharmaceutical excipients, ICHQ7 or Part 2 for APIs, and finally EU GMP Annex 1 for sterile manufacture. A high risk would really suggest that IPEC PQG Excipient may not be enough, and there would be a need to progress towards ICHQ7 standards for the GMP in this example. Next slide, please. But what are the differences between IPEC PQG GMP and ICHQ7? While IPEC PQG is in full agreement with the GMP principles in the formalized risk assessment, and it was developed by fusing ISO 9001 and ICHQ7, so there's masses of overlap and commonalities. But the main differences can be found in the detail required for validation, stability studies, and annual product reviews, and also the applicable content in ICHQ8 and Q9. So it's these things that are providing the higher level of assurance needed for novel excipients. Next slide, please. So when we apply the risk assessment to novel excipients, they're demanding applications, a high degree of assurance about patient safety is required. And so you'll definitely need IPEC PQG GMPs plus those additional elements in ICHQ7. And indeed, it may be simpler just to apply ICHQ7 as a gap analysis to make sure you've got complete coverage. But in other applications where some of those criteria I mentioned in the risk assessment are lower, for example, the design space is much better understood, then the risk assessment could include the novel excipient can be manufactured to IPEC PQG GMPs. Next slide, please. Traditional excipients such as polysorbate 80 have been suitable for parenteral applications, and they're well known. And that tends to take the risk assessment result to the low or medium end of the scale, even for parenteral applications. And IPEC PQG Excipient GMP has been proven and accepted very widely as a GMP standard for excipient manufacture for such materials. And this conclusion really calibrates the PDA IPEC risk assessment process, which comes up with the same output. Next slide, please. The lipid excipients used in the messenger RNA vaccines are novel, and with medium-high risk assessment for such materials, ICHQ7 GMP has been really the customer expectation. I think for all the reasons we discussed previously. If they haven't done the formalized risk assessment, then they've done it in an informal manner and come to much the same conclusions. The regulatory review of corresponding marketing authorizations, however, has required a full chemical quality control submission for the novel excipient. And in the case of the US, this was much more detailed safety data than was defined in a Type 4 excipient master file. So in effect, a Type 2 API master file was provided as was requested by the FDA. And the default then is that the manufacturing process for that excipient also complies with ICHQ7. You didn't really want to have a discussion with the reviewer about why a different GMP standard was applied to the manufacture of the novel excipient. Next slide, please. In conclusion, the barriers to the design, development, and manufacture and use of novel excipients can be overcome, as we've seen with the recent COVID-19 vaccines. But the societal need has to be very acute, or the commercial opportunity very significant for all parties concerned. But where those criteria are met, then a lot of mutual collaboration between the supplier and the user, and of course the regulators, will ensure that doors are opened and novel excipients can gain approval. All the same, I'm a bit skeptical in the sense that these are very stringent criteria, and only in these most demanding of cases will further novel excipients find an immediate application. That said, once used safely in an approved marketing authorization, we can expect other applications to surely follow for those novel excipients. Thank you very much for your time and attention.